I think at this point we can say Reconstruction was a failure. But why was it a failure? Why did Reconstruction fall short of its goals? So we're going to look at some of those reasons right now. First of all, racism. White Americans, generally speaking, did not think that black Americans were equal, and they, generally speaking, did not want to grant them equal rights. A notion of a biracial society of equal, with the races living alongside each other on an equal basis was actually more of a radical notion. This is not, by the way, something that's confined to the South. It's a national phenomenon. There was no commitment to racial equality, so it's doomed to failure before it even began. Another reason why it failed was constitutionalism. That meant that the differences in the power between the state governments as opposed to the federal government. Under the Constitution, as it operated up to and until the Civil War, which level of government generally had more power? It was expected to take care of the people. The states, right? Reconstruction proved that if anything was to get done, in terms of race relations, for example, what level of government needed to actually be doing it? It had to be the national government. But that's a hard notion for Americans back then to accept. Even today, many Americans believed that the state governments knew what was best for each individual state. There's also a high degree of what we call laissez-faire, or roughly speaking, leave it alone. This is a term that generally we apply to economics. Government does not help with the people with their economic status. The government does not interfere with the economy in any sort of way, or help anybody who isn't successful. That is something that all Americans believe in, unless they are the ones that needed the help. So laissez-faire here means, how much help are the freedmen going to get coming out of slavery? The answer, very little, if any, is at all. So it's not very hard to see why Reconstruction would have failed. So let me end our Reconstruction lectures with two good points. First, at least a generation of black Americans experienced voting and even holding office. That was remembered, the participation in government. The second good thing that came out of Reconstruction was constitutional amendments. The 14th and the 15th were in the Constitution, and they're there to stay. Would they have been there without Reconstruction? Of course not. They may have not meant anything until the 1900s due to the fact that they were interpreted away, but they were still there. They said things about equal rights and the right to vote. I call them unkept promises, promises of things to come. So there would have to be a second Reconstruction during the 1950s and 60s when these amendments would finally play a huge role in that process. You see, Reconstruction provided promises that the government was going to have to live up to one day. So I would posit this: Reconstruction was not finished, it merely ended.